Hello and welcome to Know Exactly Where. In this clip, we're going to continue creating a project template. In previous clips, we already created the template and the tasks. This is the screen that we're seeing on right now. And if we move to the next step, we're going to go to the definition of the predecessors. A predecessor, as you probably know, is a task that needs to be completed before another task can start. In this case, we're going to go through the project, we're going to think of the logic of the project, and create those predecessors. So let's start by looking at the first task. The first task of the project can start right off the kickoff or the setting up the start date of the project. It doesn't depend on any other. But task number two, meet together requirements, does depend on the first one, which is to actually get a quotation for it. So there's two options to add predecessors. One is to use this arrow. What this arrow is going to do is to set the previous task as the predecessor for this task. So in this case, before anybody meets together any requirements, there has to be a contact to Logo Kings to get a quotation. So that's a requirement. And the same is true for the statement of work. The SOW needs to happen after somebody has met to gather requirements, and elaborate the quotation and contract only happens after the SOW is completed. So here we see that the previous task is created as a predecessor, and this is going to be for this first phase of the project, this first task group of the project. All of the tasks depend on the previous one. So that's how we would do it. Just use this button. If you want to remove it, you can use the same button. It's going to remove that same predecessor, or it's going to add it again. So that's how simple it is to create the predecessors. The same is true here for creative conversation about company and objectives of new logo. We need this contract to be signed before we design anything. So the design phase will depend on the sign contract step two. So we again click this one and you will see that there's a little contract word here because it belongs to the previous task group. When a predecessor depends on a task from another task group, you will see the label of the task group here for clarity. And here we have the logo design. Number one, number two, number three. One possible way to do this would be to have logo design come first, then logo design come second, and then logo design come third. But in terms of predecessors, there's another way to do it, which is to give more freedom to the designer by having these three tasks, having them not depend on each other, but rather be the three of them be happening at the same time. So in this case, the three of them depend on number eight, on the creative conversation to know the objectives of the logo, but they do not depend on each other. So in this case, task number nine would depend on task number eight. That's clear. So we can use the button. But here we can, for logo design two and three, if we use the button, it's going to be making 10 depend on nine, which is not what we want. So we press this little highlighted box, and here we can manually select which are the predecessors of a task. So in this case, this depends on logo design number two, depends on task number eight, and logo design number three depends on task number eight as well. So here they are. They do depend, not necessarily depend on the task right before them. And we can also select multiple predecessors. Here we are not using it in this example, but you would be able to say, okay, it depends on number eight and number nine, which is a bit of a redundancy because number nine already depends on number eight, so you wouldn't need to do that. But here it's where in by this method, by the method of clicking the box, is where you can have multiple predecessors for a task. So in this case, we said number eight alone. Then the presentation of the logo designs and feedback has to happen after all the predecessors have occurred or are completed. In this case, I cannot make it only depend on 11 because if I make it depend on the logo design number three, this task will trigger even before task number nine, logo design one, and task number 10, logo design two, are done. So in this case, the appropriate way to do it is to actually say that it depends on 9, 10, and 11. So the three logos need to be designed before this presentation can occur. The decision can only occur when the presentation is done, and the changes can only occur if the decision has been achieved. And finally, we deliver the design, the final logo, or the final accepted logo. We get the logo approved, and we send the invoice. The client pays the invoice, and we have a closure meeting. So that's how you would define the predecessors. In this case, we followed some logic, and you saw the two ways. A faster way, if one task depends on the next, or rather on the previous. And then the more extensive method of creating multiple predecessors, or more manually picking them from the list. So see you next clip. We're going to go through the roles.